Today, we're going to tackle one of the most epic stories ever told, the journey of the ancient Israelites, from being slaves in Egypt to becoming a nation in their own land. It's this incredible saga of faith and failure, of miracles and laws. But how in the world do you capture centuries of history in just a few minutes? Well, that's exactly what we're about to do. Let's dive in.
So how do you do it? Simple. You use pictures. The whole goal here is to give you two simple diagrams, two drawings that you can literally sketch out yourself. These two images are going to unlock the entire story all the way from the book of Exodus through the book of Judges. It's an amazing way to lock this foundational history into your memory.
All right, so our first drawing is all about the book of Exodus. And Exodus is really a story of transformation. It's about how a massive group of oppressed slaves becomes a distinct people, a nation that has a direct covenant with God. So let's break down the 6 key steps. So where does this all kick off? In Egypt. The promise God made to Abraham was actually happening. His descendants were multiplying like crazy. But this made the Egyptians really nervous. Pharaoh, fearing they'd rise up against him, enslaved the Israelites. And when even that didn't stop their growth, he issued a truly horrific decree. Every single newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile River.
But you know the story, right? One of those baby boys, Moses, is miraculously saved. He's found in a basket by Pharaoh's own daughter and is raised in the palace. But as an adult, he kills an Egyptian who is beating one of his people and has to flee. And it's out there, 40 years later, that God appears to him in a burning bush with this, seemingly impossible mission. Go back to Egypt and tell the most powerful man in the world to let your people go. And what does Pharaoh say? Basically, who is this Lord? I don't know him, and there is no way I am letting Israel go. This answer right here sets the stage for a massive showdown between Pharaoh and God. And to prove his power, God sends 10 devastating plagues down on Egypt, one after another, to just break Pharaoh's stubborn will. The 10th and final plague was the most terrifying of all, the death of every firstborn in the entire land of Egypt. But the Israelites were given very specific instructions to escape it. They had to sacrifice a lamb and smear its blood on the doorframes of their houses. And when the angel of death came through, it would pass over any house marked by that blood, sparing everyone inside. This event would become like the cornerstone of their national identity. So, with his country absolutely decimated, Pharaoh finally gives in. The Israelites are free, but their journey is really just getting started. Now they have to travel to Mount Sinai, and that's where their identity as a nation is going to be truly forged. Can you even imagine this scene? Over 600,000 men, not even counting women and children, just marching out of Egypt. But of course, Pharaoh changes his mind and sends an entire army after them, trapping them at the Red Sea. But right then, in this incredible moment, God parts the sea. The water literally piles up like walls on both sides, and the Israelites walk across on dry ground. Then the walls of water crash down and completely destroy the Egyptian army. 2 months later, they make it to Mount Sinai, and it's here that God makes a formal covenant with them. He tells them, if you obey me, you will be my special people, a holy nation. And then, surrounded by thunder and lightning and smoke, God speaks the 10 Commandments, the moral foundation for their entire new society. But here's the amazing part. God doesn't just want to be some distant king. He gives Moses these super detailed instructions for building a tabernacle, which is basically a portable sanctuary. And why? So that he could live among his people. When it's all done, God's very presence, this visible cloud, comes down and fills it. He is literally dwelling right there in the middle of their camp. And boom, that's it. That's our first drawing. 6 simple steps that tell the entire story of Exodus. You start with slavery, then the calling of Moses, then the Passover, the Exodus out of Egypt, the giving of the law at Sinai, and you end with the tabernacle where God lives with them. That is the path to nationhood. Okay, ready for our second drawing? This one's going to cover the books of Numbers all the way through Judges. So the people have their covenant, they have God's presence, but their journey to the promised land, well, it takes a really unexpected turn. 40 years. That's how long they wound up wandering in the wilderness. It should have been a short trip. So why so long? Well, because when they got right up to the border of the promised land, they completely failed a major test of faith. Here's what went down. Moses sent 12 spies to go check out the land. 10 of them came back with this terrified report. They said the people there are giants, their cities are like fortresses, there's no way we can win. Only two guys, Joshua and Caleb, trusted that God would give them the victory. But the people sided with the fearful majority. And because of that disbelief, God sentenced that entire generation to wander until they died in the wilderness.
Now check this out, because this is a really cool detail for 40 years later. You have a new generation, led by Joshua, and they're ready to go into the land. And guess what? They come to another water barrier, the Jordan River. God does another miracle, but notice how different it is. At the Red Sea, the water's piled up like walls on both sides. But here, the river just stops flowing. It piles up in a heap way upstream. It's a totally distinct and powerful visual.
And this new generation, they're different. They have the faith their parents were missing. They cross the Jordan, and under Joshua's leadership, they win a whole series of stunning military victories. The promise made to Abraham centuries earlier is finally fulfilled as Joshua divides up their new home among the 12 tribes of Israel.
So awesome! They're finally in the land. Mission accomplished, right? Well, not exactly. A new problem starts to prop up. After Joshua and that whole generation pass away, a new pattern starts to take shape, and it's one that defines this entire era of the Judges. This pattern is so predictable, it's actually known as the sin cycle. It's this tragic, repeating loop of behavior. The people would forget God, they'd suffer the consequences, they'd cry out to him for help, and he'd rescue them, only for them to start the whole process over again. And this is our second drawing. Just 4 simple steps. First, sin. The people started worshiping other gods. Second, suffer. God allowed their enemies to oppress them. Third, sorry. They'd cry out to God for help. And fourth, saved. God would raise up a judge to deliver them. Sin, suffer, sorry, saved. This cycle repeated itself for hundreds of years. So there you have it. 2 simple drawings that map out a huge chunk of history. You've got the 6-step path from slavery to nationhood, and you have the 4-step sin cycle that defined their first few centuries in the land. It's a framework you can use to hold this whole sprawling story in your mind. And all this leads us to one final, really important question. The Israelites have been saved, they have God's law, they have the land he promised them, and yet they're totally fragmented and spiritually stuck in this self-destructive loop. It just begs the question, what kind of leader could possibly break this cycle and finally unite them as a real kingdom? And that is where their story goes next.